It's time for another episode of the Tan and J-Man Show. As you can see, Tanner is not here. He just got married on Saturday, so he's in Cabo on his honeymoon. So congrats to Tanner and Steph. My father is joining us once again. We had him on, when was that? February, I think, when Tanner was in Hawaii.
Yeah.
So there's the theme. Yeah, whenever Tanner goes to a beach, my dad joins us. So thanks for joining us tonight, Dad. How you doing?
I'm doing great. It really is great for me to be here. I said the last time I was here, this was on my bucket list. And my second part of my bucket list is to be invited back again. So I'm back. I feel fulfilled and feel like I've completed something now. So thank you for the invitation. And congrats to T-Dog. Beautiful wedding on Saturday to a beautiful bride. Couldn't be happier for you, T-Dog.
Yeah, that was one of the more fun weddings I've been a part of here. And I've been a part of 3 of them this year. So that was definitely top 3 most fun I've been a part of.
Yeah, it was a great wedding, and I know they enjoyed it, and we enjoyed it as well. So great time.
I have a trivia question here, and you know how the show works. I'll answer it at the end of the show. The Miami Dolphins, during the Super Bowl when they played the 49ers, it was the 1984 season. The Super Bowl was in 85. They only scored 1 touchdown that game. Who was the player that caught the ball from Marino? And
right.
I'll even give you a hint. Do you know, or do you want a hint?
Well, this is what I'd like to say. Can I phone a friend?
No. You may not phone a friend.
Okay. Well, because if I phoned a friend, this is what I would say. Friend, I want you to know I just won the BirdieorBogey. I know exactly who.
All right, so I am not going to give you a hint then. I had no idea. I'd literally never heard of this guy.
I know who it was.
So well, Dad's gonna be plus up, or he's gonna be 1 under, and Tanner and I are gonna be. I think we're both 4 over. We're terrible.
Yeah, there you go, man. Small sample size, but I take privilege in winning the day. So.
BirdieorBogey is brought to you by Arlington Public House. Arlington Public House has upscale cuisine and cocktails with a casual atmosphere. Located 703 Main Street in Rochester, Indiana. Over the weekend, they had their special was crab stuffed lobster tail, North African cold water lobster tail stuffed with a delicious jumbo lump crab on a lemon vinaigrette salad and paired with your choice of soup. And they also had chocolate brownie for 2. Decadent chocolate brownie topped with cappuccino, ice cream, caramel sauce, and candy pecans. That seems right up your alley.
Wow, I'm getting hungry listening. I need to go there sometimes.
Yeah. And every Monday night, I screwed this up when I was talking to the owner this weekend. I'm like, oh, is it $1 smoked whole wings? No, it's $2 smoked whole wings and $1 off domestic beers every Monday night at Arlington Public House. So go in there, get some wings, get some beers. I'm sure they'll have the Cubs game on here in about a half hour.
Yep.
So go check out Arlington Public House. Well, tonight I was thinking we should talk a little bit of baseball. Actually, a lot of bit of baseball, I should say. We had the trade deadline on Tuesday. It was kind of a boring trade deadline, and mainly that was because, and I talked about this last week too. The Angels took Ohtani off the market. The Cubs took Bellinger and Stroman off the market and decided to buy. So those are probably 3 of your top 4 or 5 trade targets at the deadline that are just completely gone. So it left teams scrambling. And last week my book was the Cubs would regret buying and not selling because I thought they'd have a rough week, and they ended up going 5-2 against a team who was number 1 in the NL Central in the Cincinnati Reds, and now they find themselves in 3rd place. And then again, the best team in all of baseball, the Atlanta Braves. So they played really well. But trade deadline wise, it was kind of interesting. Cubs went out, got a switch hitting first baseman who was a former Cub, Jaimir Candelaria. I talked about him a little bit last week because it literally happened 1 minute before the show started. So I got to talk about it. But he has been so far unbelievable. Exactly what the Cubs have been looking for. He's kind of stabilized the first base spot, which they haven't had a stable first baseman really all year. So far, he is 12 for 21 with 4 doubles, a homer, 4 walks, and only 2 strikeouts, while playing pretty solid defense. So he has been exactly what the Cubs have been looking for.
you can't get any better than that. I mean, in the first week, I mean, you're trying to win the fans, and you come in like that, and to put him in the middle of the lineup. I mean, already you got Bellinger and Dansby hitting well. Put him right in the middle, and I mean, they scored some runs this last week. It was unbelievable because I, like you, there's one thing about the Cubs that I thought going in trade deadline is that Jed Hoyer, their management really don't believe in this team that they can actually move forward. So I thought maybe that's why they're a little less active. But, you got to give kudos to Jed for bringing in Candelario. And I think that was a huge find for him. And it could make a big difference going into August and September, of course. So.
Yeah. And, of course, they were really familiar with him anyway, with him being in the system and kind of coming up and getting a cup of coffee in the big leagues with the Cubs in 2016, 2017. So I'm sure it made it a lot easier to part with two of the prospects they gave up because they knew Jaimier really well. And I mean, he's been buddies with Chris Morel, and he knows the guys and really knows the culture there coming up through it. And it really hasn't changed a whole lot since they traded him away. And then now he's back, and they DFA'd Trey Mancini, which was a long time coming. It's still kind of a shock that they got rid of him, considering he signed a 2-year deal and he was only in year 1. And that's the one thing I will say about Jed. I have been overly critical of Jed Hoyer because for very good reason too. And of course, this hot streak kind of takes the heat off him a little bit, but he is far more willing and apt to realize and admit his mistakes and get rid of that player than Theo was. Theo would have played that entire contract out before he admitted that he screwed up, which is kind of an ego thing. And it was nice that Jed set aside his ego, and he obviously taking Bellinger off the market proved this, but he started to believe in the team. And he said there was one moment that he's like, okay, the switch kind of flipped. It was when Stroman was pitching in Chicago against the White Sox at whatever their stadium's called now, Guaranteed Rate Field, and he gave up 7 runs. They were down 7-2, and then the very next inning, Cubs came back and tied it or got within 1, and then they ended up winning that game going away. He said that was kind of the moment where things kind of switched in his brain. And then of course they went to St. Louis, and things could have gone off the rails and they could have switched back, but they didn't. Cubs won 3 of 4, and he said they didn't actually make up their mind to buy or sell until last Sunday.
Wow.
Yeah. And they're like, we could keep these guys together and try to make a run without having to give up prospects and just kind of stand pat, or kind of do kind of a soft sell a little bit, trading guys like Michael Fulmer, Drew Smiley, guys that probably aren't going to be huge parts. But luckily they went out and got a guy that really stabilizes the lineup, hitting, he's hitting 6th or 7th. It just lengthens the lineup, and that's exactly what they needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And reality, I mean, I don't know how many times in the last 2 weeks they'd lose the first game of the series, like the Cardinal series. They played back-to-back Cardinal series almost. I think the White Sox were in between. They'd lose the first game, and I'm thinking, okay, it's time for the implosion to happen. And then Cubs just bounced back. I mean, the Reds this past week, Reds just came in and manhandled the Cubs. Cubs came back in that game, but they couldn't throw out the runner. They stole so many bases in that game and ended up winning. And I thought, it's a bad way to start a 4-game series.
Yeah.
Came back and just destroyed the Reds the next 3 games.
Yeah.
The very next game, they scored 20 runs, which is incredible. And I think almost every game, well, the last game they didn't score 10, but the other game they scored over 10, maybe 15, something like that.
Yeah, they scored 16. It was the most runs in a 2-game stretch the Cubs have had in their history. 36 runs.
Incredible. Yeah, incredible. Yeah. This is the most exciting I've been about their offense in years, probably since 2016, 2017. But and then of course Atlanta Braves come in, best team by far in baseball. I don't even think anybody's close to Atlanta right now. Cubs lose the first game. They look terrible. I think they got blanked 7-0. And then they come back the next day and win. They score late. They come back. Both games, they were down twice yesterday and came back. I mean, this team just shows a lot of gut and tenacity. And again, when you look at who Jed brought in, you got Bellinger, you got Dansby, and now Candelario. I mean, those are pretty big signings when you look at this team right now. No doubt. No question.
Yeah. It's very easy, which I have been kind of guilty of doing this, to put Jed under a microscope and only talk about his bad signings. The Michael Fulmer experiment at closer did not go well at all. The Trey Mancini and Eric Hosmer kind of platoon at first base was an absolute disaster. And there have been a handful of other, Brad Boxberger, disaster. But you look at it, their two best players are Dansby Swanson and Cody Bellinger and Mike Tauchman, who Mike Tauchman was an unheralded guy. He was a minor league signing who didn't make the team out of camp. He probably should have because he had a good spring. And then he's been up since, I believe, May 19th, and he has really, they haven't had a leadoff guy since Dexter Fowler. And we've been talking about this for 7 years now. Right. They haven't had a true leadoff guy, and against right-handed pitching, Mike Tauchman has been their best leadoff guy they've had since Dexter Fowler, and he stabilized that lineup, and he has been an absolute godsend for them.
Yeah, I mean, just like you, at first I thought he was a journeyman minor leaguer, not going to amount to much. He'll have a couple good weeks and then it'll be nothing. And it kind of looked like he was trending that way. And so they set him down for a couple games, came right back, and he really, I mean, he's been a godsend. He really has been a godsend. And I don't know how long it will last, but let's ride it until he can't produce anymore. So,
yeah, absolutely. And they need to, because Seiya Suzuki's been so bad. Really since June 12th, he's been about 200. That it's getting to the point where you can't play him against right-handed pitching anymore. And so, and that's another reason why trading for Candelario has been huge, is now you can shift Tauchman to right. You have Belly in center, which helps your defense out too. And then you have a good defensive first baseman, a good hitter in Jeimer Candelario that kind of helps. And it's going to take Seiya a ton of good at bats in order to get back in there against right-handed pitching. And honestly, I wish Tauchman would just play against lefties too, because he's handled them just fine.
I think he's great.
He is hitting. Yeah, I think he's been really solid. He has a 372 on base percentage this year, which is obviously out of the leadoff spot. That's awesome. He's has a 12.4% walk rate, a 20.2% strikeout rate. So he's striking out less than average. So he's not striking out much. He's starting to slug a little bit. Yesterday, he hit the ball on the barrel all 5 times up. He's only 2 for 5, so he had some tough luck. But he's just been spraying line drives all over the place, and he's been clutch too with runners in scoring position. It feels like he's been their best hitter here the past 2 months.
Yeah, and again, I mean, he's a guy that I'd never heard of before the season. So you're going to have these guys that are going to plug and play and really outproduce their expectation. And I would say that's true with Tauchman. I would also say the other guy at the end of their bullpen there, Albert. I mean, he's been unbelievable. Alzolay. I mean, I thought he would struggle if he walked guys, but man, he's been also unbelievable this year. I think he came in, at least last year, I don't know about this year, thinking he would be a starter. And I think he's found his groove, definitely as a closer, no doubt.
Yeah, last year I think he was hurt a majority of the year, and then he came up in September and pitched 6 games out of the bullpen, and he looked pretty good there. And then even at the beginning of the year, of course, it was Boxberger in the 8th, Fulmer in the 9th, and then Keegan Thompson in there too, who's completely fallen off the map. And Adbert was kind of like a multi-inning guy, and then he's really just taken the closer role by storm. Gave up that 2-run homer to Matt Olson, but who hasn't given up a homer to Matt Olson this year? He's been able to neutralize lefties far better than he did in his career up to this point. He doesn't walk guys at all. You don't even have to worry about that. He's walking less than 2 guys per 9 innings, which is one of the best of any closers in baseball. And he's really stabilized the back end with him and Leiter and Merriweather as well, they've all been on a pretty good roll here. And then Michael Fulmer, since May 29th, his ERA is under 2.
Yeah, he's been
so that helps significant. And he got 2 huge outs yesterday with the bases loaded. He hit Ronald Acuna with the bases loaded that forced in a run, but that's probably better than the alternative of what was going to happen. Yeah. And then he got Albies to strike out, and then he struck out Austin Riley. And they said I think that was the 5th inning, that, or it might have been the 6th inning. I think it was the 6th inning. That was the loudest Wrigley had gotten all year. So fans are starting to get back. And that's another thing that Jed said, that he wanted to reward the fans, because he said he could feel the tides turning. The atmosphere is getting better. People are starting to show back up. The social media got better, not ripping on the team. So he kind of wanted to reward the fans a little bit, because I think if they would have sold last week, the optics would have been horrendous. And I don't know if Jed would have been able to recover from that, for one.
I agree.
Yeah, huge series against the Atlanta Braves. Huge series win. And the Cubs have won 6 series in a row now.
Incredible.
And they got swept by the Angels on June 8th, and the Cubs' record was 26-36. Wow. They are 32-18 in the 50 games since then. So that's a large enough sample now that I can say, okay, maybe this team's pretty dang good.
Yeah.
And then since, let's see, monthly here, they were 14-13 in March and April combined, 10-18 in May. That was their bad month. 14-11 in June, 15-11 in July, and they're 5-1 in August. So I think May was just kind of an aberration. They're a solidly good team that as of right now, I think they have a real good shot to get to the postseason.
Yeah, I do too. And watching this offense again, I was probably most concerned with their offense. Now I'm most concerned with their pitching. But
yeah,
this offense, it just doesn't quit. I mean, they could look terrible the first 2 or 3 innings, be down by 2, 3, and then they just put it together. A good offense, I think, once they see a pitcher once or twice, or at least the second or third time, they're on him. And it seems like this team makes good adjustments. And they're really, now that I think Ross has found his groove with this lineup too, just like he has using the bullpen. He's found his groove with this lineup, and he knows the right, switches to pull, if you will. And they're not out of a game, and they just keep battling. And I love the, runners in scoring position, especially with 2 outs. I've talked about that a lot. I mean, I've seen more 2-out hits this year probably than, the last 5 years altogether. That's a fun hit right there. 2 outs, bases loaded or a guy on second, and they come through with a clutch hit. And it seems like they're more clutch than they've been probably since 2016.
Yeah. I mean, they're making more contact than they have, which that's probably part of it too. Just putting the ball in play. I mean, Ian Happ's strikeout rate is about at his career low. Nico Horner doesn't really strike out a whole lot. Madrigal doesn't really strike out at all. Tauchman, as I said, his strikeout rate's been very good this year. Bellinger has a career low strikeout percentage. And that, I think his strikeout percentage is around 15%. And since the All-Star break, the Cubs as a team have scored 164 runs, which is easily most in baseball. I think as of August 3rd, which was a few days ago, they had scored almost 50 more runs than everyone else since the All-Star break. And they're hitting 296 as a team, which Cubs for years have been low batting average, high on base, high slugging. But then you look at this year, they are third in the National League in runs scored. They are way up there in on base. They are in the National League. They are 5th in batting average, 3rd in on base percentage, 4th in slugging. They're 6th in homers. They're 3rd in stolen bases, and they're 3rd in runs.
I wonder what their ground ball rate is.
I'm sure it's higher. I can look it up here. Maybe I might have to do some research on this one, but I'm sure it's higher than it probably should be, and a lot of that has to do with the new shift rules, as balls are finding holes more than they have in years past, which that's all around baseball.
Right. Yeah. Every team has that
so far, but it does seem like in the second half they're starting to slug a little more, which is something they really struggled with early in the season. And the clutch stats, they are hitting 248 with 2 outs and runners in scoring position, which is a really good number, actually. 350 on base percentage. High leverage situations, they're hitting 253 as a team, which is okay. Low leverage, it's obviously their numbers are going to be slightly better, but medium leverage actually is better than all of them. Let's see, ground ball percentage. I don't know how I'm going to be able to find this. Detailed stats, maybe. But Cody Bellinger, going back to him, since June 15th, he is hitting 374 with 9 homers, a 414 on base percentage, a 595 slugging percentage. He's only struck out 21 times in 163 at bats. And in our baseball preview show, Tanner and I did, I said he is an absolute X factor. If he can bounce back to where he used to be, this team has a real good shot to make the playoffs. And so far, so good. I think he's hitting close to 330 as a team.
Yeah, he is. And he's building a resume. I mean, whoever can afford him is going to, he's back, I think, to his MVP season. He looks like an MVP out there. You can just really depend on him to get a hit and to play incredible defense, whether it's center field or first base. He's not a liability out in the outfield, obviously, or in the infield. So, what kind of numbers do you think he might get? And I hope the Cubs can sign him. Probably the big 2 guys that will be on the list of everybody is Shotani and Bellinger. I can imagine those will be 1 and 2 as far as position.
Yeah, I actually saw a list today, and I don't know where it was, but ESPN ranked the top 10 free agents for baseball, and I think they had Bellinger 9th. Obviously, Ohtani was 1. I don't remember about other position players above him. He might have been number 2 in position players.
Yeah, I would think pitchers would be way up there, but as far as position players.
Yeah, because Ohtani, let's see if that's behind a paywall here, because I literally just saw it today on Twitter. I think it is behind a paywall. It is. I know Ohtani was 1, Bellinger was 9. Above Bellinger, I remember seeing Julio Urias, Sonny Gray. I can't remember the other ones. But he'll if he continues this, I think he'll get 150 million, which I hope the Cubs obviously throw their hat in the ring, because he has completely turned this franchise around. And I mean, he's used to winning too, and now he's seeing how amazing Wrigley Field is when the team's winning. I mean, I think it was the 3rd inning of the game yesterday. It was a 3-2 count, and the entire stands were standing up, which doesn't happen anywhere else than Wrigley Field. In the 3rd inning of an early August game. League average ground ball percentage is 42.6%. Cubs ground ball percentage is 43.4. So it's about 1% higher. So it's around league average. Ground ball percentage. Their line drive percentage. Their fly ball percentage is below league average, but their line drive percentage is 1% above league average. So you can take that. So it's kind of a trade-off with line drive and ground ball percentage. So it does seem like there's
even last year, bases are loaded, Madrigal is going to come in and hit into a double play, ending double play. They aren't doing that as much this year. So and even Madrigal, he was kind of the odd man out, I thought, for a little while, and he's putting the bat on ball. Mm-hmm. I mean, he still has his moments at third. But I still think he's better than Wisdom.
Yeah. He's a good fit for a line. He would have been a really good fit for like the 2018 Cubs lineup. They hit a bunch of homers, but also struck out a bunch. They needed a guy like him in there. I don't know where he would have played, but they needed a guy who can make contact, him or Nico, in that sort of lineup. But I much prefer him to Patrick Wisdom, because Wisdom will run into a homer, but he'll strike out 50% of the time. He does take his walks, and he's terrible defensively at third base, which Madrigal's been pretty solid. He was bad yesterday, and it cost Justin Steele a run. But for the most part, he's been pretty solid. And he's also kind of stabilized the third base spot. But again, it's kind of nice to have a guy like Candelario that can go out there and play third base against a left-handed pitcher.
Right.
So,
absolutely.
Over the last 40 days, changes in their postseason chances. The Cubs' postseason percentage has bumped up 25% over the last 40 days, which is fifth in baseball. Only Houston, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Minnesota have higher postseason odd jumpage, I should say, in the past 40 days. 3 weeks ago, the Cubs were 43 and 49 and were 8 games back of first place in the NL Central. 3 weeks later, they're 58 and 54 and a game and a half back. So they've gained 6.5, 7 games in just 17 days or so, which is absurd.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever seen that kind of jump from a Cubs team. I mean, I think that year that Washington won the World Series, I think they were bad for the first half, and then they got hot and ended up winning the World Series. And I don't know how far they were out of the division lead. And remember, they were 1 out away from going home in the wild card. Were they a wild card team? Or
they're in the wild card game against the Brewers, and it was the 8th inning facing Josh Hader, and they were down 2, and Juan Soto hit a huge single that scored a couple to take the lead, I believe. And it's also kind of like the Phillies last year. They were terrible, and then they fired Girardi, and they kind of got hot.
Yeah.
And,
I would say it's
ended up making wild card.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. And the Cubs' run differential kind of proves that they should be one of the better teams in the National League. They have the 3rd best run differential in the National League, and I think it's 5th in all of baseball. And of course, that doesn't tell the entire story, because you got to win some close games. They've been blowing teams out and then losing close games. But the fact that they've kind of stabilized a little bit, which they've needed to do, and picking up Candelario, and the offense will probably go through ebbs and flows. And it's kind of interesting. You kind of said it a few minutes ago, how you thought the offense would be the thing that struggled, we thought, and then the pitching would be the pitching and defense we thought would carry them, and the offense would kind of struggle. They'd have to win these close, low-scoring games. It's been the exact opposite. Starting pitching, for the most part, especially the past month or so, has been pretty terrible. Stroman has an ERA over 8 since June 23rd, and they just put him on the injured list with a hip thing. Drew Smiley's been bad since the end of May. Steele's had kind of a few blow-ups here the past few weeks. He's usually pretty solid. Hendricks has had a few blow-ups. Tyone's been better than he was, but it's hard not to be better than what he was. But the offense has just been outscoring guys, outscoring teams. And in the bullpen, being an above average to good bullpen here, really since the end of May, has obviously really helped, and it's helped kind of shorten games a little bit too, which the Cubs have needed.
Yeah. I think the one regret at the deadline that they didn't do, I thought they would sign a starting pitcher, because I think they desperate, especially with Stroman's issues. The other thing that I think is intriguing is the teams that you thought would do something that did nothing. I mean, Cincinnati Reds last week, I know they have some injuries and they'll probably ebb and flow, but they really did nothing to help. And they got a minor league system that's incredible. They did nothing to help this team that were looking like one of the better teams for a while.
Yeah. And because of that, and it might not be because of that, but coincidentally, they are 0-6 since the All-Star, or since the trade deadline.
Yeah.
And of course, they get Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo back. But again, those guys haven't proven to be super consistent. So you're kind of relying on those guys to be these elite starting pitchers that they haven't been in their career at all. And it'll of course help. You'll no longer have to see Luke Weaver pitching with his ERA over 7, Ben Lively with his ERA over 5. So that will help. But I really thought they'd be a player for a guy like Justin Verlander. Now, who knows if Verlander would have, he probably wouldn't have waived his no trade clause, but there's some other guys. I mean, Michael Lorenzen from the Detroit Tigers, he's a former Red. They know him very well. And he was an all-star for the Tigers this year as starting pitcher. He could have easily helped, and they didn't do anything. And I don't know if the team kind of felt like, oh, maybe the front office doesn't believe in us and they've started to play bad. But here they are 0-6. The Mets have traded 5 players at the deadline, including Scherzer, Verlander. They traded a Mark Canha. They traded Tommy Pham, and they're 0-6 since the deadline. D-backs go out and they trade one of their better relievers in Andrew Chafin. They did acquire a closer and Tommy Pham, and they're 0-6. And then I feel so bad for Ohtani out there in LA because after they took him off of the trade block and made a bunch of moves at the deadline, they have not won since the trade deadline. So it's been pretty rough for them.
Yeah.
But
yeah, the other team, I mean, even the Brewers, I mean, they are brutal on offense. And I don't know of anything they did to help themselves. They have a great pitching staff, but they can't score runs.
Yeah. They picked up Mark Canha from the Nets, but he's more of a guy that just hits left-handed pitching. He's an older guy. I think he's in his mid to late 30s. But I thought they'd do a lot more to help themselves. The Reds didn't do anything. Obviously, the Cardinals are selling and all that, and the Pirates aren't good. So the division's there for the taking for the Cubs. In my opinion, they have this week will be tough. In New York, I hate coming into a team that's lost a bunch in a row like the Mets, who's lost 6 in a row because they're kind of due to turn it around a little bit. Then they go to Toronto, who's really good. But then the schedule lightens up significantly. They still have the Rockies twice. They have the White Sox, Royals, Tigers. So they're in position to go on an absolute roll here. Yeah. They just kind of have to stay steady through this week.
Yeah.
And hopefully they can. It's the second time this season, actually, that the Cubs have won 13 times in the 16-game stretch. After the first time they did, they lost 7 of their next 8. So hopefully they don't do that this time.
Yeah, hopefully not. Yeah, it just seems like this offense is built to go on the road, to play at home. I mean, it's not an offense that depends on the home run, although it's nice when you get one. But I think the future is bright. I love that Ross isn't playing the guys it's August. You stop playing the guys that are hurting your team. The Suzuki's, the Wisdoms,
Yeah, and he said that exact same thing too. Now's not the time. Now that we're in the race, we're going to go out and play our best 9. Which I wish he would start doing that in June.
Yeah, me too.
Instead of waiting around. But
these are pros.
And then the Cubs have scored over 150 runs in their first 20 games back since the All-Star break, which is tied for the second most since the All-Star break took place in 1933. The California Angels are the only team with more. Average attendance is way up because teams are starting to score more runs and the pace of play has been so good. Attendance across Major League Baseball averaged 38,284 on Saturday. In the 13 games, over 35,000 fans marked the first time in a 15-game slate since 2004. So fans are starting to show up here.
Yeah, it's much more enjoyable even to watch a game. I agree. I mean, tonight the Cubs started in just a couple minutes, actually 6:15. They'll be done by 8:30. There's a good chance they're going to be done by 8:30. You have the rest of your evening. I mean, I just think it's so much more active. There's fewer double plays, inning-ending killers, the double play, and it's just so much more enjoyable.
Yeah, and with the lack of or the new shift rules, guys are putting more of a focus on putting the ball in play,
right?
Which creates more action and all of that. And so, as much as I don't like Rob Manfred, he's done a pretty dang good job in my opinion.
But sounds like they did their job as far as research what could help the game, and I don't know if they changed the ball this year or not, but the ball seems livelier. So, and I know a couple of years ago they had kind of a dead ball, and then they shifted it back, but it just seems like it's better. I even like the pitch count. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I haven't even thought about the pitch clock since like early May. It's just you kind of adapt to it and kind of in spring training I hated it because I just this is different, all of that. But no, I think it's been great, and I've thoroughly enjoyed games getting over in less than 3 hours.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Shifting gears a little bit to the Chicago White Sox.
Oh boy.
They are an absolute disaster. Tim Anderson gets in a fight with Jose Ramirez on Saturday. Timmy got suspended 6 games, Jose Ramirez 3, and a couple other guys got suspended 1 or 2. But Tim's always involved in these kind of bench clearing brawls, it feels like. And there have been talks about how bad the culture is there in Chicago on the South Side. Keenan Middleton, who was a middle reliever who was traded to the New York Yankees, said culture is non-existent for the most part. They let you do whatever you want. You have rookies sleeping in the corner. Guys just don't care. And then Lance Lynn, who was there a couple years and he was traded to the Dodgers, said, I can completely attest to that the culture is non-existent, which it's kind of funny. Lynn is kind of one of those old school get in your face kind of guys that he's saying that because it means he's pretty much telling on himself because he's supposed to be a culture setter and he obviously didn't help the culture there at all either. And then I read a report right before the show that Tim Anderson and Yasmani Grandal got into a fist fight in the clubhouse the day or 2 days before the All-Star break. Grandal wasn't in the lineup the day before the All-Star break, and he wanted to just leave early, and he made it very clear. And Tim Anderson said, F him. If he doesn't want to be here, I'll pay for his flight. Grandal walked over to Tim Anderson in the tub and slapped him across the face. So it's obviously Pedro Grifol, who's a first-year manager. It sure feels like he's going to be a one and done.
Yeah.
Which honestly, the White Sox need to clean house. They had this window of opportunity and they had 2 okay years and they didn't even win a postseason series. And their GM's been there for 8 or 9 years now. Kenny Williams, who's their president of baseball, has been there forever. And the problem with having a Reinsdorf owned team is he does not like to make change. He doesn't like firing people. And so it feels like the White Sox are kind of stuck unless he makes drastic changes.
Yeah, and when it comes down to culture, locker room culture, leadership is everything. I mean, you need not only players that are going to set and obey the culture, establish the norms and the values, but you need a manager who's going to hold people accountable for it. Mm-hmm. And if you don't get the culture thing fixed, I don't care what the field looks like, what your talent is. Culture means something. I mean, you go back to all those Patriot teams and the Colts teams that won. You name it, the teams that won, Kansas City, culture. I'm talking football now. I switched over to that, but culture means something. I still remember the 2016 Cubs. That's what everybody talked about. Everybody got along. We held each other accountable, and that produces a winning culture. I think the same is true with Los Angeles Dodgers. They've had that winning culture. Mm-hmm. Braves now. I think you can see it in their players. They enjoy playing. And, the old statement that culture eats strategy for lunch, it really is true. If you don't have a good culture, forget about the strategy. It's just not going to work. So,
yeah. And that starts with your manager, coach, or whatever, to be able to set it. But it's also up to the players to be able to keep it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the players are just as much at fault as the manager is there, especially in Chicago. Because if the players don't buy in and you don't have strong leaders or whatever, it's also not going to go well because the manager can only do so much. But ultimately it does start up top, and White Sox should clean house. But again, Reinsdorf probably not gonna.
You could almost see it though when the Cubs played Chicago a couple weeks ago. The White Sox, you could almost see the attitude. Yeah, almost like there was quit attitude, and you're thinking, "Whoa, what's up with this? These are major league players."
And especially after the Cubs came back from down 7-2, you could just feel that the White Sox just kind of quit, and you really could see it on their faces, and like, oh, here we go. So
I didn't really know what went into this fight, but it was clear that Anderson, he threw the first punch, but I think Ramirez won the fight. That was fun to watch.
He knocked Tim down, and Tim, I guess, is very notorious for making very hard tags when guys are clearly safe. And I think Jose just had enough of it, and he just kind of went at him. And he said he's been disrespecting the game for a long time, and I'm just sick of it. So
But Yeah, it's sad to watch, honestly. These guys get paid a lot of money to do this.
Yep. I have a word association here. I should probably pull up the thing here real quick. It is baseball related. It is every single player that played in the Game 7 of the 2016 World Series for the Cubs, not the Indians, guys. But starting with Dexter Fowler.
Dexter Fowler. As Dexter goes, that's the way we go. That's what Madden always said. And he was kind of a delight. He'd always come up with that big old smile. I think he was a culture setter. And
Absolutely.
He set the table, offensively for those guys that battled behind him. And I don't know how people would really evaluate his career, but at least his Cubs career was really, it was unbelievable. I was sad when they didn't re-sign him again. Because remember, after 2016, they weren't going to sign him. Then they kind of surprised all the players and brought him back for I think it was 2017 or 18, something like that.
It was 2015 he was there, and then he wasn't going to sign back, and they signed him back for 2016.
Thank God they did.
Yeah.
Even watching the World Series, Game 7, he leads off with a home run.
Yeah.
That's just Dexter. He was a competitor. Yep. Good player.
Yep. Kyle Schwarber.
Going back to the 2016, I don't know that I've ever felt worse when I saw somebody have an injury like Kyle's, because, 2015, that guy was coming along. I was looking forward to what he was going to do in 2016. I think it was the first or second series, against Anaheim. That
it was against – it was the second series, the opener against Arizona. Big outfield there.
Yeah, and I think it was Dexter and him collided, or yeah, and boy, as soon as Schwarber, you knew he was out, you just thought, oh boy, what's going to happen with this team? They continue to battle, but Schwarber, I really thought he would hit, 280 and 30 home runs a year. He really never got the average up. I think the Cubs kind of experimented too much, like he was leading off for a while, and and he wasn't a great defensive player. I'd love to have him now with the DH.
Yeah.
So anyway, I really liked him. Really liked him. Good player.
Albert Almora.
He could get to difficult catches in the outfield, and he'd make them look really good. But you said several times it's because he's so slow.
Because he was slow. Yeah.
He was a good glove man. Not much of an offensive guy.
Yeah. He was kind of like Jim Edmonds a little bit out there. Edmonds was notorious for playing so shallow, and then he'd lollygag back to the ball and then make an unbelievable catch because he could. Almora wasn't like that, but it was because he was so slow he had to make these diving catches. But his offensive game is real.
I watched him in the minor leagues. You and I both did. And wow, if this guy can hit, he's going to be good. Never really panned out.
Yep. Chris Bryant.
Man, if there's anything I'm sad about, it just seems like he had those injuries in 2018, 2019, and he just never recovered again. But his rookie season wins Rookie of the Year. His second season, MVP. People were putting him up there with the Bryce Harpers, and I just thought he would be a Cub for 20 years. They'd win 3 or 4, World Series, and it didn't happen. So sad about that.
I was just looking at his stats yesterday, and man, you can just see it tail off starting really in 2018. He just wasn't the same guy. So his peak was as good as anyone, but his values has been as bad as anyone.
Right.
So it is kind of sad. Anthony Rizzo.
One of my favorite Cubs ever. I hope that they sign him back at the end of his career. Just one of my favorite Cubs. Always a smile. Talk about a culture guy. He was just good to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He was the captain. So
yeah, absolutely.
Ben Zobrist.
Ben, is he on the program tonight or was he last night? They're bringing him back. Maybe tonight he's going to be on marquee. Ben was that glue guy. I don't know that they win the World Series without Ben.
Oh, they absolutely don't.
He was the glue guy. He MVP of the World Series. He was just a good guy to have around.
Yeah. Addison Russell.
Yeah, again, ashamed of what happened to him, the domestic violence stuff, because as a shortstop, even though he had a weak arm, he was as good as can be. And that 2016 season, was it 2016? He had like 95 RBIs, or was that 2015? 2016.
No, 2016. Yeah, he hit 21 homers, 95 RBIs.
Yeah.
And I think he hit 7th or something like that.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Wilson Contreras.
Wilson. I mean, I loved his passion. Now that he's with the Cardinals, I don't like him nearly as much, but
I don't like him at all now.
I liked his passion, and man, when he hit that ball, it was unbelievable.
Yeah. I will say my love for Dexter Fowler never ceased when he was with the Cardinals, because he was a pretty likable guy, but Wilson, with the comments he's made and some of his actions, kind of made me mad.
He has to be one of the fastest running catchers I've ever seen.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he's one of the better athletes to ever play behind the plate.
Definitely.
So, yeah. David Ross.
David Ross. I mean, I still like David, the ultimate backup catcher. I mean, he could catch, the Lesters, and kind of a specialty guy. I always loved his behind the throw at first base. When a guy would lead off a little bit, he'd pick so many guys off of first base.
Yeah.
But even his World Series and leading in the playoffs, it was just remarkable.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, he was a culture guy too. He was kind of an extension of Joe Madden.
Yeah, really was.
The wily old vet.
Yep.
Chris Coughlin played in this game.
Yeah. When I see the replays, I think he was there for the World
Series. Yeah.
So he's the guy that you thought, oh, he's never going anywhere, but he just hung around. And I mean, I don't really remember what he did offensively or even defensively, but he had an impact, I guess.
He had a good 2015, and then he was with someone else in 16, and they picked him up like mid-season. And his most famous moment was playing against the Cardinals on a 3-2 count. Cubs were down 2, I believe, and he called for timeout, but they didn't grant it to him. And Carlos Martinez delivered it, and he just kind of lobbed it up there, and Coughlin hit a 2-run single to tie the game.
Yeah, I remember
that. That was kind of his claim to fame that year.
Claim to fame.
Miggy Montero.
Oh man, that home run he hit against the Dodgers, facing a lefty. I think there were 2 strikes. Were they down 1 or 2 or maybe even tied?
No, it was a tie game because Aroldis came in the 8th, and he gave up a 2-run single to Adrian Gonzalez to tie it. And then 3-2 count, 2 out. Montero about hit one onto Sheffield.
Yeah, that was my favorite moment with Montero. I'll tell you the thing I didn't like about him. He couldn't throw out base runners. I remember one time Washington stole every time they got on base. I mean, it was incredible. So.
Yeah, that was the last game he played as a Cub, because he kind of blamed Arrieta a little bit.
Yeah, I remember that.
Because he was slow to the plate. But Jason Hayward.
Hayward, again, he was one of my favorite. Didn't really hit much, but culture guy. They don't win that 7th game without him. That speech he gave, that's what he's most famous for. But I like Jason. I mean, he didn't ever hit for power. His season or his career with the Cubs was definitely over, sooner than when they released him. So,
Javi Baez.
Oh, most exciting player. I still think he's a really exciting player. He probably wished he would have signed with the Cubs when they made him an offer in 2021. He probably wished he would have signed. I don't think he likes Detroit at all. They're starting to like him, though. He still comes up with amazing plays.
He does.
My favorite Javi Baez moment was against Pittsburgh, running down first base and then stall and so somebody can score, and then he still ends up with a double.
Yeah.
And thrown away.
Yeah, Javi had an unbelievable way about him to have fielders completely forget how to play baseball, because all Will Craig, the Pirates first baseman, had to do was just go and touch first base and it's over. And there was something about him that I mean, he was super aggressive, and that forced the action, which helped. But
even non-Cubs fans would tune in just to see Javi, because he was exciting.
Yeah, he
definitely
had a really good 2 or 3 year stretch offensively, and he just hasn't been the same guy since, unfortunately. But moving on to the pitchers, we have 5 of them here. Kyle Hendricks.
Yeah, Kyle. Did he lead in ERA that year.
Yep.
That's what I thought. He was the scholar out there. He would dice people to pieces.
The professor.
Yeah, professor. That's
it. Johnny Lester.
Johnny Lester. I mean, Steele and him are a lot alike. You would give Johnny the ball in any big time moment, but I remember times he'd give up 5 runs the first inning and think this guy's toast, get him out of there, and then he'd come back and finish the 6th inning and not give up anything. And he was just the guy you want on a team for grit and toughness and resilience.
Yeah, you knew even if he didn't have his good stuff, he was going to grind and get you through 5 or 6 to save the bullpen and keep you in the game too. Which again, Justin Steele kind of has that ability too.
Yeah.
Aroldis Chapman.
Yeah, 103-mile-an-hour fastball. Again, that World Series, I think they wore him out at the end.
They did.
But he was a great pickup midway through the 2016 because both of their closers, Cubs had a closer, Rondon, that got hurt. And they had to go out and make a deal for a closer, and they got the best of the best at that time.
And Pedro Strop tore his meniscus and was out a month and a half too.
I remember that.
So yeah, and Chapman's known for or remembered for giving up that homer to Rajay Davis, but they don't even get to the World Series without him.
They don't,
or even get to that Game 7 without him. They might get there, but they don't get to that Game 7. C.J. Edwards.
CJ, he's still around somewhere, I think.
Yeah, he's still hanging around.
Little fireballer.
Oh, he is. Where he is.
Yeah, I think it was with Washington or maybe even Philadelphia or something.
He was. I don't know if he's still with Washington, but he's kind of hung around a little bit.
He was a fireballer. I mean, I think that was his rookie season, 2016, and Joe Madden seemed to depend on him, especially in the World Series. He was his go-to guy.
Yep. Last one here, Mike Montgomery.
I mean, the last pitch of the World Series, it was him. I mean, when they put him in, I thought, oh no, we're in trouble.
Yeah. And, first save of his career was in Game 7 of the World Series.
First save, and that final pitch was, I mean, I must have jumped up, 10 feet high. It seemed like. So unbelievable. Good memories there.
That will do it for Word Association. It is brought to you by Pro Forma Print 2 Promo Group. Every time Tanner's gone, I always forget to ask for the read. So go print some stuff from Pro Forma Print 2 Promo Group. I'm going to do On This Day real quick. This has pretty much been a Cubs podcast tonight, and I'm very happy about that.
Yeah.
And I'm very okay with it. They are... is that ball gonna stay in the ball yard? It is not. Pete Alonso hit a 3-run homer.
Yep.
Cubs are down 3-0. That ball just kept going, and he hit it so high. This will actually be the J-Man's Book of Producer of the Week. I think they find a way to go 3-3 this week, which is what they really need to do. Tonight is a really bad pitching matchup for them, with of course Smiley on the bump, but then also facing Kodai Senga. So I've already kind of chalked this up to a loss, which being down 3-0 kind of helps that. But even beforehand with Smiley on there. But the next 2, hopefully they'll be able to get the next 2 and then maybe win 1 or 2 in Toronto. So a lot of season left, and it's nice they're back in it. So J-Man's Book of Producer of the Week brought to you by Indiana Farm Bureau Insurance Agent Travis Watching for life, home, auto, business, renters, workers' comp, and farm insurance. Contact Travis at 219-869-4561. His email is travis.watching@infb.com. On this day in 1929, New York Yankees slugger Babe Ruth tied an MLB record by hitting grand slams in consecutive games for the second time. Wonder how many times that's happened. I'm sure it's happened. On this day in... a lot of baseball, of course. Tour de France. 51-year-old Satchel Paige of the Miami Marlins wins the game before the largest crowd in minor league history. 57,000 people at Miami's Orange Bowl. They played this game. The International League Marlins beat the Columbus Jets 6-2. Satchel Paige was pitching at 51 years old. On this day in 1960, Arnold Palmer's 20th PGA Tour win happened. He rallied from a 5-stroke deficit. On this day in There's not a whole lot of good ones. 1992, San Francisco Giants announced sale of MLB franchise to a group of Tampa Bay investors, but the move was blocked by other investors. I need to read into that a little more. That sounds interesting. On this day in 1992, the Orlando Magic signed NBA #1 draft pick Shaquille O'Neal. He had a pretty good career.
Yep, for sure.
On this day in 99, Tampa Bay third baseman Wade Boggs became the first MLB player to hit a home run for his 3,000th hit. I believe Derek Jeter did that later on in his career, though. On this day in 2004, Cubs pitcher Greg Maddux entered the history books with his 300th career win in San Francisco. I remember watching that game. We were listening to it on the radio anyway. We went up to, was it New Buffalo, Michigan, and went to the lake, Lake Michigan, and then we stopped at a restaurant, and I remember watching him win his 300th at a restaurant.
I remember that too, yeah.
I think, wasn't New Buffalo that we went to?
I think it was, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I was 12 years old, but I do remember that.
I remember it, though.
On this day in 2007, San Francisco Giants slugger Barry Bonds hit his 756th career home run to break Hank Aaron's longest-standing MLB record. On this day in... that's going to do it, actually, for On This Day. On This Day is brought to you by Mooney Wood Crafts. Let's find it here. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Mooney Wood Crafts. Again, don't have the read from Tanner, but very skilled craftsman Thad Mooney is. So go buy some stuff from Thad today. Contact him. I know he's on Facebook. I'm sure there's other ways you can contact him. So go get some nicely crafted things from Thaddeus Mooney, whether it's sports stuff. I mean, Tanner has some really Tanner has a Tan and J-Man show on that's really cool. He has a couple sports ones, boiler breakdown one, so that's pretty cool as well. This has been a baseball show tonight.
Yeah, sorry about that for those of you who are not Cubs fans.
Yeah, I'm very, very happy about it. I have wanted to do just a Cubs centric podcast forever.
Very Cubs centric, and it was hard on the word association. I realized I needed to do one word, but and talking about those guys that were incredible, great memories. It was hard to come up with words. So.
You do exactly what we do though, because it's supposed to be just one word, but we end up going on long statements about these guys.
Yeah.
I will say the preseason college football coaches poll was released today. Georgia's on top. You have Michigan 2. Alabama 3, Ohio State 4, LSU 5, USC 6, Penn State 7. So there's 3 Big Ten teams in the top 7.
Wow.
Florida State 8, Clemson 9, Tennessee 10, Washington 11. I guess you can count Washington and Oregon now that they're officially members of the Big Ten. Well, not officially, but are going to be joining the Big Ten here in a few years. Texas 12, Notre Dame 13. I believe that's Utah 14, Oregon 15. TCU 16, Kansas State 17, Oregon State 18, Oklahoma 19, North Carolina 20, Wisconsin 21, Ole Miss 22, Tulane is number 23, Texas Tech's number 24, and Texas A&M's number 25. So 1, 2, 3, 4 Big Ten current Big Ten teams in there. And
Did
then
you call Iowa in there?
Iowa is not in there.
That's what I was thinking. You think Texas will start Manning?
No. Their quarterback Quinn Ewers is a Heisman candidate, so I believe. Yeah, I think Arch will redshirt, but I'm sure he'll play a little. But we are about out of time, so I will give you the birdie bogey that you are so confident you're going to get. Who was the person to catch the only touchdown the Dolphins had in that? I think it was Super Bowl 16 between the Miami Dolphins and San Francisco Niners.
And after I came out so confident, another name came to me. So I'll tell you the name that came to me, and I know it doesn't really count much, but Joe Rose is the name that I would have guessed. But also Bruce Hardy, I remember, was pretty involved in that game. So was it Joe Rose?
It was not.
Oh, no.
It also wasn't Bruce Hardy. It was Dan Johnson.
Dan Johnson. He was the other tight end.
Yeah, he was
Why
tight
didn't I
end.
remember him?
Yeah, he only had 1,000 career receiving yards. I had literally never heard of him until I looked it up.
Yeah, there were 3 great tight ends on that team.
Yeah.
And it was Hardy, Rose, and I totally forgot about Johnson. Oh, well, so much for my super confidence that just got destroyed.
Yeah. Dan Johnson was a tough one. I was going to give you the clues like it wasn't the Marx brothers, but that probably would have been too obvious.
Yeah.
I
knew it wasn't
one
them.
of them, but thanks for watching the Tan and J-Man Show Cubs podcast tonight. We will be back at it next Monday, Tanner and I, and we will be previewing the ACC conference and Notre Dame as well for football. So have a fantastic week, everybody. Thanks to my dad for joining us, and we'll have him back on soon. See you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.